The Tunnel to Summer, The Exit of Goodbyes. In addition to being a bit of a mouthful title, it's also an anime movie that came out in 2022 by Studio Clap, which isn't really known for a whole lot, but nevertheless managed to make one of the most gorgeous anime films I have seen in a long time. That is not to say this film is all sunshine and rainbows, because believe me, if you see people discuss this movie, you will see a wide range of opinions on it, from really positive ones to completely negative ones. So let's try and dissect why that is, and hopefully allow me to kind of understand where I stand on the movie by the end of this video. In addition to its animation quality, this film is also very immediately notable for its short runtime. Usually we expect films to be at least 90 minutes, an hour and a half, probably more like hour 40, hour 45 if we're being honest. So to have a film that is clocking in at an hour and 23 minutes is already going to raise some eyebrows and make some people wonder, well, if it's shorter than normal, is it really going to be that good? Especially when you realize that it's really not an hour and 23, it's really more like an hour 18 if you cut out the ending credits and the opening credits and all that. So it doesn't really have a lot of time to establish a story and tell it to its conclusion. And that's a problem a lot of people have with films, especially shorter ones, because if they are standalone stories and not, attached to an existing property where you already would have the benefit of knowing the characters in the setting, how exactly can it tell a story? Especially if it's also trying to do all that while juggling a romance, where you have to establish the romance and develop the romance and make it feel justified. I mean, there are plenty of anime television series that do not manage to justify their romance, and they have multiple episodes to do so. So it's not surprising that one could look at a short film that's supposed to also be a romance and wonder, how is it going to be able to pull any of that off in any sort of satisfying way when it's only an hour and 18 minutes? I will say, as someone who often struggles to find a lot of anime romance justifiable, this is a film where I think it actually achieves it. Despite its short runtime, it is able to make these characters feel like they genuinely care about each other, even though they don't know each other prior to the start of the film. They're meeting, becoming friends, they're becoming more than friends. All feels justified. It all feels well-paced. And in general, this film is remarkably well-paced. While I do think that, yes, there are certain moments that are definitely a little bit convenient in order to get the plot moving, I respect that the film does, in fact, get the plot moving, and it doesn't feel like it's rushing into it too much. It's doing what it needs to work within the constraints of only being an hour and 18 minutes. I am generally happy with how the film is structured in terms of developing the characters, explaining what their problems are, why they would do some of the things they do, and making their love for each other feel genuine. I, as the viewer, can believe that these characters love each other by the end of the story. That being said, it is particularly interesting that this film is as short as it is, because it's not like this is an anime original story where they can do whatever they want. No, this is an adaptation, and an adaptation that notably cuts out a lot. This is the sort of story that definitely, in an ideal world, if you were doing a full adaptation, would have been a television series. It would not have been a movie. The level of vitriol you'll see regarding this adaptation because of how much it cuts out, you can understand why people would not like it. You can understand why taking certain characters who have major roles in the source material and reducing them to only having a couple lines and only having a few notable scenes and then doing nothing throughout the rest of the film would tick a lot of people off, especially if those characters ended up being really relevant and really important to the overall plot in the source material. So if someone looks at this film who has read the source material and says, I cannot like this no matter what, even if it is generally well-paced given the constraints that are placed on it, even if the main romance is still handled well, if they can't get over the fact that all this stuff was cut out, that major characters had their roles reduced to basically nothing, I can't blame them for that. In fact, knowing that that is what happened, it honestly ticks me off a bit to know that there's a version of this story that goes into a lot more depth, that has a lot more moving parts to it, and that will almost certainly never get to see that animated because this adaptation already exists. So while I can't directly feel the same level of rage and annoyance that a lot of these fans of the source material do when watching this movie, I can definitely understand it. I can definitely see where they're coming from. But at the same time, I can also understand why a film that, for whatever reason, was placed under these time constraints decided to narrow the focus to just a couple characters and their story and their romance, instead of trying to juggle more moving parts than it honestly would have been able to handle. And I think recognizing that time constraint, the film largely is able to tell a competent story. One that, as I already said, is able to pace itself well, establish the problems that these characters are facing, and also handle its supernatural element without feeling like there needs to be more explained about it. Because at the end of the day, we don't learn all that much about the Arashima Tunnel. Go in and you get back something, someone who's died, something you've lost. And we see the characters throughout the film try to test that and learn different aspects of how the tunnel works, how much the time differential is. You know, you're in the tunnel for a few seconds and a few hours will have passed outside. You're in the tunnel for a few minutes and a week might have passed outside. And it's through that they bond and become friends. This is where you see the development of Tono and Hanashiro's relationship as they test more and more of this tunnel, learn more about it, and we start to understand why they would be willing to give up so much of their time, so much of their lives to potentially get back something they've lost. Think about doing that. I mean, these are people who will sacrifice an entire 3-day weekend at one point in the story just to go a little bit further into this tunnel that seemingly is endless, that is just flanked by maple trees on both sides and doesn't seem to have an end. They will lose hours, days, weeks, potentially more of their lives just to try and understand a little bit more about this tunnel. And notably, we do have the time to see them actually try and do the research into it, to look at, okay, is this based on something in Japanese mythology? Is this based on some sort of local town culture? Is there any sort of basis for this tunnel existing? You know, where did this legend come from? And they don't entirely figure everything out, but the movie presents it in a way that never feels overly complicated, that never feels convoluted. And I think when you're telling a story that involves some sort of central supernatural aspect, it's perfectly fine for it not to reveal everything about it, as long as you don't introduce all these caveats, introduce all these aspects of it that just never get paid off. The more complicated you make something like this, some sort of supernatural mechanic, the more you end up needing to eventually justify what it is in its entirety. If you keep it general enough while still balancing it out and making it understandable enough for the purposes of the story, I think you can get away with not going into a crazy amount of detail justifying why this thing exists. So another credit I will give to the film is that it balances the handling of the Arashima Tunnel well. I don't feel like I need to understand more about it, but I also don't feel like I understand nothing about it. The movie does enough exploring it to establish what it is without making it feel so complicated, so unbelievably convoluted that I feel like I need more of an explanation. And I'm sure in the source material where there's more time, they probably do explain it a little bit more. But given the film that we have, I think it does do a really good job handling its supernatural aspect without making it feel like I need to see more or making it feel overly complex. So most of this video has been me praising this film, praising its animation, because really this is one of the most gorgeous films I've seen in a long time. Even though this is a studio that really hasn't done a lot, they really know how to handle their movies. In fact, one of the only other major things they've done is a previous anime film called Pompo the Cinephile, which is also a absolutely gorgeous film. So when Studio Clap does a film, they really do go all out. But my opinion on this film is not all fantastic. And a lot of that comes down to the last quarter of the film, like basically everything after the hour mark or so. And I don't want to spoil too much about this film if you haven't seen it, because this is a short watch. It's not something that's going to take up that much of your time, and it is relatively easy to access. It's on a number of streaming services, both subbed and dubbed. So I would recommend, if you care about spoilers, pause the video here, go watch the film. It's not going to take up that much of your time, and then come back and we'll continue through the spoiler section of this video. This is your warning. Now we're going to move on. So when Tono decides to go in the tunnel without Hanashiro, I understand why he does it, because obviously, one, he's a 16-year-old kid. He's not thinking properly. And also, he's ultimately doing it because he wants to give Hanashiro the ability to become a successful manga artist. Because originally, when they were both planning to go in, they did not really have anything that they cared about in this world. Hanashiro doesn't feel connected to her parents. They really disrespected her grandfather. She wanted to be a manga artist like him, but she knew the struggles he went through. She didn't think she was good enough. She really feels like she is alone. Tono is the same thing, because his mother left them, his sister's dead, his dad is a drunk and beats him and doesn't treat him well. He doesn't really feel like he has a lot to live for either. The reason why they're willing to give up so much of their time by exploring this tunnel and spending days or weeks in our world going through the tunnel is because they don't really feel like they're losing anything. They don't feel like they're giving up anything by doing that. They'd rather do this and maybe have the chance of getting back what they've lost. They even say it doesn't really matter if they're in the tunnel for the equivalent of thousands of years. They won't feel like they've really missed anything. But once Hanashiro has the ability to actually become a manga artist, that's where Tono's like, all right, I'm going to do this because I need to, especially because, the pressure of his dad potentially remarrying and then moving away and all that. That is enough for him to feel like, no, I have to do this because now she does have something worth living for. So I understand why he does it, but the thing about the ending that really kind of leaves an awkward taste in my mouth is simply the sheer amount of time that Tono is in the tunnel and the amount of time that passes in the real world. 8 years is a long time, and I really feel like it being that long is what makes me have issues with the ending. If it was only like 3 years or 4 years that him and Hanashiro were separated, I think I'd be more willing to accept it. But for them to be apart that long, I really feel like is what made me so frustrated at aspects of this ending. I understand, like, okay, they want Hanashiro to graduate, they want her to establish herself as a manga artist, and they want her ultimately to kind of get into a rut, and despite the amount of time that has passed, still miss Tono and want to see him and still be in love with him, and still feel like her life is missing something without him, learning that it really wasn't becoming a manga artist, even though that's still important to her, that would fulfill her, that would give her meaning in life, give her a reason to want to be in this world. It was being with Tono. And Tono ultimately, realizes that as well. He realizes what he really needed wasn't to get his sister back, it was to feel like he had someone worth living for, to feel like he had a place to belong. And he has that as long as he's with Hanashiro. It's a bit of a tragedy in a sense that it takes them that long, that they have to waste all that time to realize that, and that they end up both being out of time at the end because they spend another 5 years in the tunnel. But all that isn't really supposed to matter because, hey, they're together at the end. It doesn't matter that Hanashiro's been gone for 5 years, that Tono's been gone for 13 years by the end. At least they can be together now. And that's fine. And the basic idea of that ending, I don't really have a problem with. I just feel like 8 years is a long time to have them be separated. Is a really long time, and ignoring that, yes, it results in them starting off the same age, and now Hanashiro is 8 years older than Tono, and that's awkward for reasons. How are they going to be able to really live their lives now when they've both been out of time for so long? I mean, maybe Hanashiro can adjust relatively easily because it's only been 5 years, but 13 years, that's a long time, just because this guy's clearly been declared missing, been declared dead. How exactly do you readjust? And you're not supposed to think about that. It's not supposed to matter because that's not the point. That's not what the ending of the movie is trying to go for. The whole point is none of that matters because they have each other. I just wish that it wasn't as long a period of time. I don't think you needed 8 years to get Hanashiro to the point that she was before she reunited with Tono in the movie. I think 4-ish years would have been fine. Like, are they really going to be able to just pick up where they left off after one of them has lived an entire life for 8 years and the other one has only had like a few hours pass? I just can't help but have those thoughts flood through my mind when I'm trying to think about the ending of this film. And that's not something you want. You want an ending that makes you satisfied. Like, obviously, nothing wrong with thinking about an ending, with dissecting an ending. But when these thoughts come into your head that make you think, well, I'm not sure I'm okay with this ending. I'm not sure these characters would be okay with this ending. I'm not sure they would actually be able to be happy with each other at the end of this movie. These are thoughts that I don't want to have in my head at the end of a story like this. And while I don't think that this ending ruins the film, I don't think that it makes me hate the film or dislike the film, it does leave an awkward taste in my mouth. And it's the sort of thing that I think could have been avoided if it just wasn't as long a period of time. Or alternatively, they could have had a completely different ending. You could have had the characters both go into the tunnel together or both decide not to go into the tunnel. I think both of those could have worked out, but I do think they wanted to have this dynamic of one going into the tunnel so that the other could live a quote-unquote happy life, only for neither one of them to really be happy and realize that the things that would make them happy are not things they could find in the tunnel, but things they could find in each other. That's what kind of leaves me feeling uneasy about this film. And it's not the kind of feeling I wanted to have, because for the first hour or so, I really enjoyed this story, but nevertheless, it is what I'm left with. And it's because of that I don't really fault anyone for any opinion they have on this film, because I understand if somebody hates this film from the get-go because of all the stuff it cuts out from the source material. I can understand somebody liking the film but hating it once they get to the ending. I can also understand people who like it all the way through. I can understand people who feel like me, who like most of it but feel a little bit awkward towards the ending. The range of all those opinions all feel understandable to me. I get where someone would be coming from if they hate this film. I get where someone would be coming from if they adore this film. And that does make talking about it both unusual, because you never really know what you're going to get when you're discussing it, when you put an opinion out there into the ether, but you also end up having a lot of genuine discussion regarding it as a result, because people can feel so different about the same relatively short product. And while it would be easy for me to say, even though I generally like this film, my issues with the ending notwithstanding, it still probably should have gotten a full adaptation, I also have to wonder if the decision was really between giving it a full adaptation or giving it this movie, or if it was instead between giving it this movie or getting no adaptation at all. And I suppose at the end of the day, despite the issues I do have with the finished product, I'm still happier with this existing than not getting anything at all. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and let me know what you think about this film if you've seen it, because really, any opinion under the sun could be held regarding this movie. Until next time, take care everyone. Look forward to the next video.